So good afternoon again. Thank you very much for coming back to our second panel. As indicated at the beginning, this will be a so-called stakeholders panel. And the conference continues, deliberating on the overarching provocative title or question, that is whether the European Union should become a federation, not necessarily a federal state, not necessarily, but perhaps also the United States of Europe, but maybe a federal regime. Would there be an added value to that? Or from another perspective, maybe the EU already is a federation, but it doesn't live up to the standards of federalist accountability. These are the questions that I have had in mind for this panel, but luckily it is not me who's moderating it. Katja, Triller, Vrtovec will be doing it, so I'm passing the floor to Katja.
Distinguished guests of this second panel are drawing from our left is Žiga, who is a full professor at the University of Ljubljana and was former minister in the government of the Republic of Slovenia. From 2008 to 2010, he was the Secretary General of Felipe Gonzalez Protection Group on the Fiscal Europe. This group was set up by the European Council as an independent group of wise men and women expected to contemplate on the strategic challenges which Europe faces in the long term. The second speaker is Professor Jambrek. He is presently the rector of the new university and former president of the Constitutional Court, among many other distinguished functions. And in order to encourage the discussion on the constitutional process in the EU, in 2016, he drafted a draft treaty for the constitution of the EU, which has been known as the Ljubljana Initiative. The third guest is Borut, Pahor, former president of the Republic of Slovenia, whom I do not need to talk because everybody knows you, and it's a true European. In 2022, he received an honorary doctorate from the new university for his contributions to the common European project, and also received the Ring of Tolerance from the European Academy of Sciences and Arts. My left is Anže, member of the European Union, Republic of Slovenia, and former Minister of Foreign Affairs. During his term, Slovenia was presiding in the Council of the EU, and in 2022 was as such part of joint presidency over the Conference on the Future of Europe, which enabled European citizens to be actively involved in debates and their expectations about the European future. So let me first start with one very simple question. What does the term federalization of the EU mean to you? It's obviously marks an integration process, a path we walk the aim to unite sovereign countries of Europe. But where should we stop and say this political arrangement is the best balance between geopolitical urge to strengthen the EU executive exclusive powers on the one hand, and between well-established EU principle of subsidiarity on the other hand?
Addressing
Yes.
Invited.
You can take the floor also there if you prefer. They will see you and hear you better. Thanks.
Okay, I'm here that I will address the audience in a more formal way, and first consider an honor to the university that the president of the republic, Borut is attending it, and my honor also to note that the chair of the Jambrek chair on tourism in the US, our prorector, Professor Avbelj, is attending. There's an obvious choice for this symposium, and as we were invited by Ms. Katja Triller Vrtovec, also a professor at the new university, she mentioned the Ljubljana initiative, and that was written 7 years ago, and then made public. The text was made public in the year 2016 and 17 at one of the international conferences attended also by our guests from Europe, but in there also was the key speaker to the conference, and there we introduced the new draft treaty for the Constitution of the European Union. The idea of federalism was not mentioned verbatim in these same words, but the draft treaty on the front page of the publication with the wording of the treaty stated that the European Union is supposed to be the balanced union of nations, civil societies and market economies, and that this balanced union of nations should pay respect to the freedom of individual citizens within the union, should secure security for the union and justice for the union citizen. But that was the idea which we could probably also identify as the idea of a specific federalism, not really confederalism, but more inclined towards federalism. Then we defined in an appendix to this draft treaty reasons, political reasons, which lead the authors, which took the treaty as their own endeavor in the form of Ljubljana initiative, especially led by President Pahor, that the idea should be implemented on the level of the European Union in the forthcoming years for the specific political reasons. I will not repeat those reasons, but among ourselves, the signatories of the Ljubljana initiative supporting the treaty, we consider that reasons stated 7 years ago, not only that they are the same, but strengthened by the needs of the European Union to become an important player among the powers on the world, seem that the European Union should be an area of freedoms in terms of civil rights and economic rights, that it should be an area of security within firmly stated external borders of the European Union, better protected and respected as they are now, and that the European Union should remain, in principle, a union of nations, precisely of nation states, where the nations would preserve their basic initial sovereignty, save for the rights, sovereign rights transferred in a precise way to the European Union. Rights which can also be withdrawn from the Union and transferred back to the nation states, member states, in case of need, in case that the nation state would, in a way, reach the mood of disappointment with the European Union, encouraging the European Union to respect the sovereign rights of the nation states and their own constitutional traditions. Then the whole text of the draft treaty presented to the public, also to the European public, we have received many feedbacks from all kinds of academic and political circles to the draft treaty, mainly positive, one quite strongly negative from a British professor who claimed that if such a treaty would be implemented, then the Great Britain, the United Kingdom, made a good decision to Brexit, to get out of the European Union. So that was an interesting feedback which we claimed and was consented in a way. But the treaty also, the draft treaty, was not written anew, but was based and is based upon the present treaties, the two present texts of the European Union and of the application of the basic European Union text. So the two present treaties were amended, specific decisions, clauses were changed or omitted according to a generally quite radically new systematic view on the constitutional order of the European Union. The present treaties, as we know, then contain together 467 articles on 248 pages. Quite a lengthy text, a little bit shorter than the Kardel's Yugoslav Socialist Constitution had drafted and implemented in 1975. But then the new draft treaty we presented reduced the number of pages to 78 and number of articles to 205. A radical narrowing of the size of the text, trying to bring it closer to the average reader citizen of the European Union. Now, in terms of legal architecture of such a constitution, with a radically shorter text, basic principles are that materia constitutionis was reduced to exclusive and shared competencies only, whereby the number of policy areas pertaining to coordinated and complementary competencies were omitted. Union's regulatory authority was reduced, allowing to development of voluntary, not constitutionally prescribed exchange among actors in economy and in civil society. However, we added a new area of exclusive competence, and that is control of external borders of the Union's inner area of freedom and security. Competencies in the areas of foreign affairs, security, and defense were elevated to the Union's explicit shared competencies, where the Union exerts sovereign rights conferred on its federal level by the member state. Constitutional principle of separation, division, and balance of the three powers, legislative, executive, and judicial, which are in the present text quite abstractly undefined, not as rigorously implemented as in a classic constitutional text of the European nation states. Such powers, divisional powers, was in our text vigorously introduced into the Union's structural governance. And the structure of and competencies of legislative institutions are reduced to the bicameral parliament, which is substituting the present institutions of the European Council, the Council and Parliament. Rather complicated and not very obviously interpreted structure of the present constitutional order. Functions of the present commission we transferred to the executive branch, represented, and that is the most radical input of the draft, represented by the monocratic body of the president, to be elected by the direct vote of the European Union citizens, and thus powers of the hardly effective present-day commission, composed of all members, I think 27 member states, are conferred to the president following the United States example. Thank you very much for this.
Now I invite Mr. Žiga.
Yeah, maybe a brief introduction from my view as well. Avbelj was saying that the title of the session was provocative. I think this title is even more provocative. So towards European Federation, does this mean that we are moving towards European Empire? And I think there are some reasons to do that. Can I move this forward, please? Yes. Just me. Okay. So what I want to say is basically, yes, ever closer union. This is an old dream by many philosophers, etc. But it made it into the treaties, it made it into the institutions, and it has now a life of its own. But this is not how the EU or how Europe as a continent worked in the past. In the past, order in this territory was emergent. It made use of dispersed knowledge, and if you have dispersed knowledge, this leads to limited and dispersed political power. And in an era of history when knowledge became more important, it was this dispersed knowledge and dispersed political power of Europe that enabled Europe to be much stronger than the rest of the world. Federation, European Federation, federal state is not a development in this tradition. And it cannot be democratically achieved without European limbs. And a multinational thing, where many nations come together, is called an empire. It's not necessarily a federation. So the contents basically are this: approaches to ever closer union. Hayek's strength, I think there's not fair to Hayek not mentioning his contribution to the architecture of the EU. where the problems are arising to, let's say, Hayekian architecture and and that are moving us towards ever closer union, and then of course the conclusion. So the approaches to European, to ever closer union, it started with a dream, and these dreams are basically as old as European history. You had big names who each of them had an idea about united Europe or some European constitution or something like that. And the clear objective number one has been through history peace, also unity, and to some extent also the power that gives that results if many nations come together. The underlying instincts, I think, are also quite interesting. Yes, humans have a tendency to try to work in larger and larger groups because it pulls together more resources, more knowledge. There's safety in larger groups, but there could also be an underlying nostalgia for Christianity, for Christendom. This area was known as Christendom before nation states appeared, and maybe we are echoing, or there is some echo of that in the idea of the European Federation. If you look at historical development in Europe, we have the separation of church and state. Nation states emerged, quite different from one religion, one empire solutions of Islam, of China, of Persia, and so on. Christianity had kind of unified empires, but since there were nation states, not so much. So these were the dreams. Then come the treaties. It started in the Treaty of Rome. Treaty of Rome had in the preamble this idea of ever closer union. Article 2 was speaking about creating closer relations among the states of Europe. The idea of states of Europe then disappeared in later treaties, and ever closer union was moved into the main text of the treaty. How the ever closer union is getting ever closer. I think there are six mechanisms in play in general. Spinelli's kind of big bang, let's just write a constitution and change, create this monolithic European Union. Monnet's basically saying whenever there's a crisis, you need some more competencies, and then you stick to those competencies even when the crisis is over. Then I think you have Hayek's liberal market federalism and the Christian democratic decentralized federalism. The first two are kind of big government approaches, centralizing more and more competencies in Brussels. The other two are the small government approaches, and maybe both of these small government approaches are in a kind of defensive. The Christian democratic, especially because they are just trying to slow down what the other three are trying to do. And then, of course, in the debates of the future of Europe, there is also this idea of, yes, we need more Europe, we need an ever closer union, but in this Christian fundamentalist thing. So yes, Christian civilization or our Western civilization needs a strong political entity that would take those values, those historic values of Athens, of Jerusalem, of Rome forward. And of course, there is this contrarian view of Europe of nation states. Let's delete the dream of ever closer union from the treaties. What I think is interesting in the discussion of what European Union is, was, and has to be or will be in the future, to look at this called Hayek's trap of interstate federation. Hayek was a kind of classical liberal economist, philosopher, many other things. And he was studying a lot about the use of knowledge in society, how to maximize the knowledge that exists in society, the knowledge of scientists and of developers and of innovators, of capitalists, but also the knowledge of common men, of common people who have their desires, etc. And he said that, well, the economic problem of society is that nobody has all the knowledge. Nobody has everything in totality. So in order to create an economic order, it is important that this knowledge never exists in concentrated or integrated form, but solely as dispersed bits of incomplete and frequently contradictory knowledge, which all the separate individuals possess. And from this idea that nobody knows it all, nobody can centrally plan stuff, etc., comes his hostility towards central planning and towards big government. And his blueprint of materialized in the European economic community is basically the following. He says we have to create a kind of interstate federation. You create a free market. In this free market, if a member state wants to, for example, in Slovenia, help the steel industry, okay, it will help the steel industry, where we would get the money from all the other industries. But these other industries will, of course, be on an open European market, and they will suffer because of the extra tax to support the Slovenian steel industry. So the national governments would not be able to do much interference in economy. The Brussels government, imagine now Brussels saying, oh, we will support steel industry in Europe in general. But there will be member states who will have steel industry, and there will be member states that don't have steel industry. So the member states that don't have steel industry would be against that. So this is the so-called Hayek's trap. If you create a free market among sovereign states, it discourages both the central authority to do central planning as well as the member states to do central planning. And this is what basically created and what is underlying the common market of European Union. Basically, nobody is allowed very much to pick winners or to subsidize this or that. Yes, you can do a little bit, but you may be even punished for that, and it may be economically unsound for you. But then, of course, this market worked very nicely, but there were people unhappy with the market working so well. So they started to talk about, I want to go back. First of all, about the democratic deficit. So the EU is not democratic, the elites are remote, and nobody voted for the president of the Commission, Council, etc., etc. And with this talk of the democratic deficit, they created this mechanism. Okay, so there's a democratic deficit. That's how we need more democracy. If there's more democracy, we can move more power to Brussels. If we move more power to Brussels, there's democratic deficit again, and you are reinforcing the central government. And the solution to democratic deficit, when you look at it, what people want to do, what the proposals are out there, basically is let's make European Union more like a nation state. We basically started with the European Parliament, and it never got any better. And the other complaint was that the EU is not socially just, that there is not enough solidarity among member states, that only the Union as a whole could protect the rights of workers, etc. Then there was this discussion of the social union, etc., etc. The problem with this approach is, again, if you want social justice, if you want security collaboration, if you want democracy, social justice means that one group will be giving money to another group. It works within a nation, it does not work among nations. Somebody will be dying. People from one nation will be dying for guys of another nation. Again, it does not work so well among nations. And similarly, democracy works if you have one demos where people are willing to sacrifice for their fellow men, but not so well in a non-democratic or in a multinational settings. And we don't have European nation, we don't have European demos. And again, the solution was, yes, let's make the EU more like a nation state. So how do you create a democratic nation state without demos, without one demos, without one peoples? And Frankfurt School came to the rescue. Frankfurt School, Habermas conveniently wrote that a nation is founded less on a shared lived tradition than a set of indisputable values. So we don't, if you want to have this idea or this advantages of a nation state. We don't have to be one nation, we just have to share values. And people wrote into the European treaties, you know, the union is founded on values, this, and so on. Values as replacement of nation. And I'm not sure it works quite like that. Hayek to the Frankfurt School, Hayek to the rescue in this case. But what Hayek also found is that planning or central direction of economic activity presupposes the existence of common ideals and common values, and the degree to which planning can be carried is limited to the extent to which agreement on such a common scale of values can be obtained or enforced. Okay, so the more common values, the more central planning that can exist. Just imagine Soviet Union, former Yugoslavia, we had a lot of common values, a lot of centralized control. Which values? That's a very important question. And we could have a long debate about what are values and where do they come from. But in any case, I do not believe that values are designed, that values are a product of human reason. Values come from someplace else. And basing a union on values which are reasoned out manufactured is, in the words of Alan Bloom, the stupidest and most pernicious illusion. So to conclude, the present EU still works, in spite of Brussels increasingly decided what are the competences of Brussels. It has realized Hayek's vision of interstate federation. It is creating prosperity by weakening who could intervene in economy, and it is creating peace by creating a common market and free movement. And I think this can take us a long way. A lot simply follows from that. It's automatically achieved through that. Would Europe be better off as federation? The world is a place where knowledge and innovation matter. And you don't want in this world where knowledge and innovation matters for everyone to go in one direction, for everyone to work, to march in the same direction, to follow the same rules, to create the same institutional frameworks within their countries. The strength of Europe historically has been different countries experimenting with different things and then learning from each other. Democratic federations, they work, but they work within nation states. There is no such thing as European demos or European nation. There are many nations. And frankly, I think multinational so-called federations, they have been known as empires. Towards European empire, if this would be the title of the session today, I don't think it sounds so nice. But in essence, what's the difference to the empires? I get it.
Very much. Now I invite Logar.
Well, thank you for the word. Federalism towards federalism. I think this is a question which is much dependent on when you ask someone about the issue. For instance, should you ask Poles in 2004, when they joined the European Union, would they be eager to make Brussels stronger or to go into the more enhanced cooperation within the EU? They would, I guess, say yes. if you ask them now, they would be very upset if you propose something like this. And in European Union, well, this is let's say, unity sui generis system, which is in constant change. It's keep, let's say, hunting its tail. And every time there's a new crisis, it appears that it was one step behind. We are prepared then for the next crisis, but when the next crisis arrives, we again find out that we were still too late. It is in a way a miracle that European Union, after so many crises, survived. But it survived only because the cost of, say, dissolving the European Union would be much too high. And even though there are statesmen, president of state or prime minister, who from, let's say, Monday to Friday are blaming Brussels, at the end, when they're just before the, let's say, crack of the union, they are so wise to say, okay, I will make a step back. And if you ask me, say today, the question of federal Europe is off the table. And it will remain for quite some time. But if you ask me, when I in 2003 became a civil servant in the European Parliament, then I was very eager to defend and to advocate federal European Union. Then we said to it the United States of Europe. I even remember in 2005, when there was this big event in 2004, there was a Washington Post correspondent, Red, from London, based in London, who wrote the book, The United States of Europe, stating, being aware of this historical event when European Union was reunited after the democratic process in 10 new member states, he was claiming that the model of European Union is the model of future. The soft power of diplomacy, it's much stronger than the hard and soft power of United States. But I yesterday looked at the Amazon bookstore. You can buy this book for cheap now. It's not very a lot of consumers of this book, and even after so many crises, it proved that the thesis was wrong. But yet the idea is nice, and it was not his idea actually. It was Winston Churchill that said in his lecture before the students in Zurich in 1946, when he said that if we want to solve or evade such atrocity as that happened during the Second World War, the only answer to that is the United States of Europe. Personally, I'm fond of this kind of thinking, but let's say rationally, I'm aware that due to the constant crisis environment we are facing, this is impossible to happen. And I would add additional thing. I wrote a master thesis. Mr. Jambrek was in the, how to say, commission when they assessed my master thesis. When I was stating that enlarging European Union with Turkey would lead to the same result as the Roman Empire. Stating when you become too big, you become unmanageable. When you become unmanageable, sooner or later, this eagerness to do something on your expense fade away. So, you know, this nationalistic, personal goals prevail over the community-wise orientation. And I must say that European Union did not perform very well on this field. Just to put it very simply, now we have, for example, the disparity between the richest and the poorest country in European Union, 1 to 10. Bulgaria has a 10,000 euros per capita in 2021, while Luxembourg has 114,000. Yet, when I was writing my thesis 10 years ago, this was 1 to 5. So this disparity is going even bigger. And imagine how would you have advocates among all member states going federal if this division is going even bigger. So unless we are bringing closer the living standard of our fellow citizens, there will be no ardent supporter among citizens of European Union for going into the further ever closer union. So I would say I would go back to the famous Clinton. It's economy stupid. It's this personal life, and only with achieving higher living standard, you might then start to think of being more efficient. And one day I hope that let's say rationale or the thesis from the book, the United States of Europe will will bear fruit. But until we are better off, so until we come closer in our living standard within European Union, I doubt that this might happen. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So the shocking thing is that I'm of the same opinion of Logar, but with completely different conclusions. Because of all those problems, you've extremely good named them. I think the only way to go would be to go with some sort of United States of Europe, but 3 years. Now, I should be frank with this audience. Nobody knows what will happen. I don't know what will happen. The fair thing to say is what I would like to see, what should happen. Now, from different historical experiences, I think the only way to go on with the European idea as it is in this very moment is to call for a new convention on the future of Europe, which should be as serious as it has been the one in 2003 and 2004. Maybe the time has not been the best at the moment, but I'm pretty sure that in a couple of years, maybe even before that, there would be some sort of idea which would be then a consensus among all 27 that the time has come to bring, smart heads together and think how to go on. What I think is that with the Europe as it is now, we could not go and go and go, not to come at one point to the danger of failure. So I would say it is some sort of historical need for the European Union to think about its future, because with the Lisbon Treaty, a lot of problems have been solved and could be solved, but the new challenges within the Union and around the Union, in a way, push us to a new phase of consideration how our internal life should be organized. And I think the answer should be, we have to done this with some sort of new draft constitution. And that would be also some sort of answer to how can we protect our European interest in the world that it has been changed and it has been changing all the time. So it's not that, you know, I cannot imagine a different kind of future, but this different kind of a future than the United States of Europe gave us once again. I'm not very happy about it. I'm not really ready to support it. It brings so many fears to me. And let me just conclude with saying that in any way, the time has come for our society to take more serious consideration what we as Slovenes would like to see when we are debating the future of Europe. What kind of future is suitable for our small but vital nation? We have had some brutal and good experiences with some sort of federations back in the history. Is there any historical, message for us how to go on or how not to go on? So my position is the historical need will bring us, tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, to a new phase of our development. It will be maybe a chaotic debate about how to go on, but in case of our society, it would be very nice if we would be able to think this a little bit more in organized way, and I should call on the university maybe to do that in the next couple of years. We've done it with the draft constitution and the so-called Ljubljana initiative, and I think it's still valid. But I would suggest to the presidency that maybe in next years we will focus on this specific issue. What would be good for us? How European Union should go on? Because not that all alternatives are good for us. It has been more than 30 years that we are an independent country. We would like to be an independent country, but still a member of the European family. So there is a question of our sovereignty, but still the question, how much of this should we, and we would like to transfer to European Union? In which way? Under which conditions? I think there is a lack of such a political and academic debate, and I would propose to the university to be a step ahead of others and to organize such a debate, and call all that would like to share with us these concerns to come together and to think a little bit more. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Very much for those very interesting presentations. Maybe now I open the podium for any questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. And I heard that this is really one that actually will see us. So it's a bit reluctant, but what I heard is that to some degree there is some advocacy from the panel for some new constitutional settlement, or at the very least a new constitutional dialogue with citizens, whether they are Slovenian, French, Hungarian, etc. And my question then is, what problem does a new constitutional settlement actually solve? Because I haven't really heard that. So from a citizen's perspective, if I look back at my experience, I voted in 2005. I had the ability to vote, and I voted in 2005 on the Constitution Treaty. Yeah, I also had a vote in 2016 on the Brexit referendum. I don't think those constitutional moments, if you will, provide any benefit to me as a citizen. And I don't normally vote for politics in elections anyway, no pressure as to politics. But for these referendums, I made an exception. Yeah. And what need does it really solve to have this constitutional settlement anew, to open all of that up again? Because I haven't understood it.
answer it briefly. Do you think that, sir, do you think that without any concerns how to go on, we could live without any problems and issues? That basically, you know, the status is just okay, and we should, within this topic, find a couple of solutions. Is that an answer to you?
I think the existing settlements actually works within its remit for the purpose that the member states and the citizens more or less accepted. Trying to reopen that debate, the debate that the European Council closed off, I guess, in 2007, when it came to what do we do about the Constitutional Treaty, we'll just get rid of the treaty too. I actually think that based on the priorities, is an acceptable settlement.
But that is fair enough, but this treaty has been different, and I don't know that the treaty back in 1992 and this treaty has been a different kind of, you know, so we are going on. We are not standing, and is that correct? So the debate here is how to go on. You don't think that this is necessary? Okay.
With the
This is okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I would respond to this question in a way which appears to us professional lawyers, constitutional scholars, is very obvious. The present two texts are, from a legal point of view, invalid. They are incompetently written. They are written and published in such a way that they are inaccessible for an intelligent reader, a citizen of the European Union. They are of no use for an ordinary citizen going through a couple of hundred pages of statements and clauses which are hardly legally comprehensible. You can hardly defend the wording of the clauses, which are over criticized, over morally, I would say, prevailingly vague and do not bind authorities in a clear, decisive way. It's, from a constitutional legal point of view, a very lousy text. And it does not enhance democratic culture in the European Union. Only that. And just to simplify, in ordinary legal language, the two texts would be a big achievement without any political consequences. You can state the same way as they are, just make them a little bit more elegant legal text. That would be a great achievement.
Professor Jambrek, with respect, may I ask, do you think they are lousy by design or they are lousy by accident? Basically, it is like an incompetence.
But then they were
stupidity.
better,
It cannot be all.
but they were much better, but then it fell.
I think they are deliberately vague. They're deliberately vague because this is how compromise.
Yes, because it failed in the referendum in France, so they had to change it, and they changed it in a way that it's unreadable. But I just wanted to say, you know, maybe when there was the deal that the agreement, funding agreement of the EU, it works okay for an average citizen.
Inaccessible.
The question is, what do you want from Europe? If you want, I couldn't care less about what is happening with the European Union, just leave me alone, I want to have a good life. Or you want to have the European Union a global player? Depends. If the former, so the first statement, then it's okay. We can stay some time like this, but at the end, we will be faced with the situation where all other superpower overpass us dramatically, and the gap is so big that we cannot anymore like run after them. So we have to adapt in order to make union more functional. And just to give you a small example, enlargement process. Unreasonable, unacceptable blockage from Bulgaria to starting enlargement process with Macedonia. They applied in 2005, they fulfilled all requirements for in 2010, and they were in the waiting room. And even when everyone were okay with the starting process, European Union needed for 4 consecutive presidencies to deal on daily basis for the issue because of stubborn Bulgarian refusal of giving a green light. So we lost more than 2 years in vain for nothing. Our fellow citizens from Macedonia were desperate. They said, sorry, everything is okay and you cannot reach an agreement. This is unfunctional European Union. And actually, the desire to become a member of such union went down. And it has an effect as well on the other countries that might, with bringing them within European Union, make a value added for European Union. So I would rather say that it's saying it's okay for me, Joie de vivre, it's okay. I couldn't care less. Europe is there to deliver. I would not invest anything in it. But I don't, as a politician, I don't find this as a proper answer to the, let's say, dear situation we are facing and how dependent we are, a national state, from the success of the European Union as a sui generis union. So I vote for amending the treaties.
Thank you very much for these excellent presentations. I enjoyed them a lot. I also thank to Andrew for igniting this debate even more. Let me throw a good thesis that we heard his name several times today, Joseph Weiler, developed with regard to the constitutional debate we had in Europe, and you were invoking his articles today. And famously, once he wrote, and it was little understood, I still think it's little understood. He said, well, yes, no matter how much we contest the present legal situation in Europe, in the European Union, it's clear it all started with the treaties. These were international treaties. These were then constitutionalized through the force of the European Court of Justice. So we can take it for granted that in formal terms, we already have a constitution. What we do not have is constitutionalism to deal with the content of this constitution. And I think the same thing we can say about federation and federalism. We already have a federation, and I will explain why I believe it's so. But we do not have federalism that would contain this federation. And we have federation because we have a federal legal order. There is a relationship between the EU law and national law, its contestation, like in a federal regime. We have an economic order which is pretty much resembling a federal economic order. Mr. Kuchuk today spoke about the fiscalization of the European Union. We have a nascent, not that we have a nascent fiscal union, but we have a fully fledged monetary union. And during the crisis, yes, we have built the economic, we have built the health union without compromises. The health union is a premium. We have built the banking union, we have built the energy union, all sorts of union, eventually also the union. So we have a corporation that it is out there. Brussels is invested with real powers. And the member states have transferred real powers. Now, what is federalism? Federalism as a theory and practice requires that two obligations ought to be given. The member states should shirk on their responsibilities, and the center, the federal government, should exceed the limits of its competences. But what all this presupposes is that there is a federal ethos, that there is someone in whose name is being governed, and the one that is being governed is actually aware it's being governed. And here, I dare to say, Žiga, it doesn't help us say, well, there is no European democracy in terms. The problem is that the European Union, and there was this kind of things. It has accumulated a lot of powers, in some corners even exceeding those of the United States. And yet nobody in the member states among the different demoi isn't aware of that. And we are still playing national games while nobody is policing the center. So the question is, and this is what Anthony disputes, could the new constitutional process, like you are, like Mr. President is advocating for, could this new constitutional process close this gap between the real federal powers in the center and the complete democratic unawareness of the national demo that they're actually participating in a new kind of politics? My answer to that, it's a theoretical, academic, naive, and normative answer, yes, I see no other means of closing this gap. If we do not close this gap, we will have less and less and less accountable center in Brussels. And we will have more and more national politicians abusing the fact of the gap, and they will be more and more able to scapegoat the European Union for whatever it goes wrong, and they will be more and more able to free ride on the achievements of the European Union. I think the present situation, that's also the outcome of the project that we have been running for 4 years, the present state of affairs, and we will probably agree on that or not, it's in a deep democratic paralysis in such a way democratically unsustainable. And something ought to be done. And the least that we can do is to think about it, to deliberate about it. I'm sure that the university will do that, but I think this should spill over much more also into the daily affairs of ordinary citizens and of the actual convention of the future of Europe. Not just one that took place somewhere in Brussels between the interinstitutional victory, but something that would be actually brought to the awareness of the individual citizens out there, so that they're actually aware that they are living already in the federal polity. Yet they are not controlling it. It's not any longer done in effect in their name. I wonder what you think about that.
The argument a little bit reminds me of a joke or a proposal like that years ago, when I was again jokingly advocating Schrödinger Federation. The federation, if you look at it, it does not look like a federation. When you look away, it is a federation. And basically, it is roughly along the lines that we're just describing. But, and you were saying that yes, we have it, and no, we don't have it. If we have it, why do we want to change the treaties? If we don't have it, why do you think that we are having it? So I think in the background of many of the debates, and what the colleague was also asking is the project, is the European project sustainable if it does not have a kind of future goal? And it has a future goal because, in my view, I'm sorry for being conservative, it is neglecting its past foundations. So it is justifying itself with a vision of the future because it is hesitant to justify itself with the, let's say, traditions of the past. Just 2 comments on what has been said by esteemed colleagues. We need more Europe to be a global player. You know, when Europe was a global player, when the Portuguese were sailing the sea, when the Spaniards were sailing the sea, when the French were marching on Moscow, when the Brits had, empire, the sun never set, we were global players, never as big as when we had very successful individual member states. And the decline was, the decline of Roman Empire, everything in one basket, and it lasted for some time, and then it disappeared. I think whatever we do, I think this diversity and this possibility that different countries rule themselves differently, try with different institutions, try with different constitutions, try with different legal orders, etc. This brings innovation. And this has been the strong, the forte of Europe. We were strong when we were diverse, and we were weak when somebody tried to make an empire. And when you're talking about, we have to deal it with federalism and so on, You know, it's like convincing people, look, you are Europeans, you're not Slovenians, Germans, and so on. I mean, everyone referendum, it was spectacularly favored at the end. You know, people are this tribal animals. And they don't see Europe as a tribe. Yes, maybe us, you know, and those who travel to Brussels every now and then, and frequent flyer, and you meet people from across Europe, and say, we are all Europeans. Or when we meet another European in China. But I would say, let's face it, why wouldn't we say, basically, this is what we have is good enough? The colleague was asking, what's the problem? What is the problem that we are solving? Besides the not having the vision.
Should I answer?
I cannot be only devil's advocate.
Propose it to think about it, but I would like to answer you my experiences dealing with two crises as Prime Minister with financial crisis back in 2008 and 2009, and as President with the COVID crisis. In both crises, it has been very clear to everybody that institutions are not fit to deliver what would be necessary to be more, you know, how to put it, effective. That is an answer to your maybe to your question.
Doesn't it always go, I mean, even when you were a prime minister? I'm sure that when I was a minister and when everybody was a minister, then it's really, if only I had more power, I can do so much more, I can do so much better. And in the end of the day, Europe solved the financial crisis, solved the COVID crisis. We will meet into crisis, and at some point Macedonia will enter the EU. It's easier. It's difficult to do things by consensus. It's easier to do it by majority. It's even easier to do it as you know, an emperor said. This is how.
But we saw the political crisis with some innovations, also institutional kind that, you know, shows us that this is important to think.
Well, let's say roughly I disagree. I mean, if you look that way, even if you don't do something, it will solve some way. Even when the comet falls on Earth, it destroyed the universe, but at the end it brought to the glass, I think. So, you know, it's good. The question is, if we are, you know, if we are okay with that, if we are okay with that, that we are diverse, we think differently, let's do whatever we do, however we do within the European Union, then I would say that the centralization or federalization of European Union is far too high, and we should lower it down. We should bring it really on a small, just you know, like small commission, and with rather very limited competences, not such a huge apparatus as it is now. And then we will witness European Union that use all gears from 1 to 7 and even reverse problem. And this will bring multi-layered European Union. It will happen in any way slower if should we not change our funding treaties in accordance to needs of the European Union. And I'm not in favor of haphazard development of European Union. I rather see that we have a vision, we see what we want to achieve, and we go towards that direction. And I disagree that when we were diverse, when we were different, we solved the problem. It's not true. I was sitting in a Foreign Affairs Committee for 3 years, and it was somehow impossible to achieve an agreement until Russia invaded Ukraine. It was on the verge of, you know, let's say, breaking, let's say, committee or council with no agreement apparently on anything due to some member states who were very joyfully opposing the common agreement. And only then, when there was a real threat, that's why I was explaining before, some statesmen took this step back in order to get an agreement. So I wouldn't say that it's European Union really involved in any case. I think we are very close, or we could be very close on one step too much on the way down. And I wouldn't like to be on that path. I would rather call before and start to do something in advance in order to be prepared for the next challenges that lays ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Logar. I would like to come back to the audience.
Thank you. The idea or suggestion of empire is a very nice skill. It reminds me of a book of Robert Cooper, I think it was written in 2003, with the title of The Breaking of Nations, Order and Chaos in 21st Century. And there he compared the EU to a post-Roman empire. And I think he says, voluntary and cooperative empire. So it's based on freedom and cooperation. But still, if one thinks of classical definition of empires in fact don't have borders. They need to expand, and then they hit to a problem. And we hit with the American problem, obviously. And what is, I think, very important as regards the empire is that they have a center and the periphery. And here I see a problem that we have within the EU. And it is a kind of distinction between central view and the views from periphery. And I think this is somehow related to what we now see as more and more variety, more and more different views. And it was obvious with the attack of Russia on Ukraine already in 2014, because in fact it started then, that so-called peripheral views from peripheral member states have not been taken into the account, and their historic experiences and lessons learned. When the European Council met after the first meeting of the last year's February 24, at the time I used to be State Secretary at the Prime Minister's office. We had, when they had lunch in our masters, we had a luncheon for ourselves as well. And I was sitting with two colleagues from, let's say, so original member states. And their view at that time, what it is about, was shocking to the extent that probably they would not admit nowadays that there was their view that they stated to me at that time. So the question for me is, I obviously see that there is a need to do something about, because these varieties of vulnerabilities of risk factors do compel us to, first of all, talk to each other much more deeply than we do. I don't know whether the conventional idea is the right one, because we would probably immediately embark on questions of division of power, who gets relative question of relative balance of power is extremely important, but there are questions of objectives. And it seems to me that it's only when there is a crisis that we reflect again what are our objectives. Professor Cross said at the first session that, if I understood you correctly, that there is hardly anything which we named crisis that would qualify a very rigorous qualification of being a crisis. But I remember when President Pahor was Prime Minister, it was a time of Euro crisis. And there was a meeting where we really had an impression that we've been staring into an abyss. And then we, by improvising, we resolved the crisis. But it seems to me that this is simply the most integrated part of what we are doing, the Eurozone. There is a certain asymmetry. We have centralized, really supranational monetary competence, but economic policy making is different, is very much decentralized. And immediately when the crisis was no longer that acute, we immediately started to slow down what we promised during the crisis, so we found that we need to do, namely a bank union, capitalist markets union, and we are nowhere there. And when Commission proposes something, then we see that, of course, it's not about the neutral game in town. Already, how the EMU is designed is not totally neutral, because now Germany is blocking it, and from the other side of the, let's say, interest, it's Italy blocking it as well. Because probably one or the other see that whatever we decide, it will change significantly the playing field. But I think we need to do it, because if there is another crisis that hit the monetary union, probably we will be again forced to improvise if we don't resolve it now. So I don't have any concrete idea about realization, but I think that we would need to have a forum to discuss the objectives again and the vulnerabilities of member states, to be much more sincere and not forced immediately to design a new distribution or division of power and man's power. Instead, everyone will be on a defensive and really get nowhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tate. Any comments?
Maybe just a short notice, I mean, how stuck we are. Look, we have still 27 commissioners. It's irrational, sorry. You cannot have 27 portfolios. Until we agree that the numbers will be limited to the portfolios that are really important for the European Union, I guess the rationality is lacking in a debate or how to develop European Union or which direction to go. But anytime, and even during the Lisbon Treaty, this was open. Countries were unable to agree that, let's say, one-third of country will get its commissioner every second term. No way. But from my point of view, this would be only rational. I want to have a commission that works, not the commission that has a portfolio, let's say, multilateralism, which I really don't know what was the value added of this commissioner for the lady. And the last very efficient commissioner was Jacques Delors. He was so efficient, he made this monetary union. He was so efficient that the big state then said, we don't want to have any more so strong president of the commission. And this is then what leads us where we are, somewhere in limbo, where beneath the scenes, those very wise drafters of the acquis can make a decision taking place if there is interest, or not taking place if there is no interest, while there is no scrutiny or there is not public, let's say, check if everything's go right according to the treaty. So I think that debate on the changement of our treaties or treaties of the European Union should be really, really rational. And if it is not, the result won't be something what we want. It's like if I put in the national politics, like electoral law. We can never agree on the proper electoral law because of the reason we know those who are elected by this law don't want to be not elected by the new law. And there is a vicious circle.
Thank you. Now I turn the audience has open hands, so I don't know who was first.
So I will be very strong with CRH, so you say very exciting discussion. We should continue, I have to say. I would limit myself because of the limit of time just to few footnotes and put it that way. When we started several years ago under the intellectual leadership of Peter Jambrek, this idea of actually the discussion of the future of the European Union, our purpose was that somehow we have to discuss it seriously because the Union functions in a way well, but from time to time we face situations in which, as people say, we are inefficient, we are not capable to make decisions, we are losing our position under political work, etc. Necessary that we discuss on that, and I still need discussion to the also in that. Why footnotes? You know, the impact of Europe in humanity, in the whole world, it was the largest. Our ideas, our civilization, all what we contributed really to the community, from political ideas to the humanitarian ideas and so on, was in the time when Europe was part of the of being production. So it was united by the spirit. Here, my next thought. European Union is based and should be based on values, common values, and consequently on common basic interests. And we say it is. It said we share our values, it is a community, and it is to me always a kind of question. It's a pointing question. Why cannot there be more uniform? Why are we incapable to act? Because the basic for any good functioning union should be common values and common interests. And we spend a lot of energies unproductively in some discussions, as it was mentioned by the Minister Logar, and here not to repeat that. The last question, the last statement which I will make. You know, I think the problem of contemporary European Union is the problem of leadership. When the great story of European integration started, there was not public speech, there was not vote, referenda, etc., etc. The leaders of Europe at that time had a vision, were capable enough to carry this vision, and we started to move on this great journey. I'm not pessimistic, I'm optimistic. We will go ahead. And here, my last point. After the crisis which we are facing now, war in Ukraine, very threatening crisis, a very dangerous things. We are not over it yet, it's still being spread. So, but in the history, whenever humanity and Europe faced or was involved in a big crisis, after that, There was a change of international system and a state of change. After the religious wars, Westphalian Congress, a state of change. After Napoleonic wars, Vienna, Ljubljana, blah, blah, and so on, a state of change. After First World War, Versailles. After Second World War, United Nations and so on. I think a kind of moment is coming for the whole world, but in particular, after the end of drama in Ukraine, which will come, open regions, we will resist aggression, but when it comes, there will be right time to receive many things. There will be maybe an opportunity to make also some institutional changes within the European system. I was maybe too simplified. It was not because of the limit of time. And even though I was too long, so this is
Thank you for your wise thoughts. Now because the time is certain, I say give the word.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments for Professor Turk. Why I think that his writings about interstate federalism and don't actually the reality suggested by the politics. Because I mean, can we define Canada and empire? I mean, it's still typical multinational federalism. Can we define Switzerland and empire? I mean, can we perhaps India? I mean, perhaps India could be compared to empire, but there are many jurisdictions that actually show that it is possible to join forces, to have the forces, and to come up with the federal experience. Also, because this is another important part. I think that we tend to neglect the function that a constitution made for. We tend to think that a constitution mirror a sort of pre-existing popular entity to provide with big homogeneity, but very frequently, actually, constitutions contribute to the creation of the identity of the constitutional subject by creating procedures, by family values. So, actually, constitutions contribute to making the people, and this is also the history of the United States. If one looks at the speeches of John Calhoun, former vice president of the United States, he was extremely tough about what the words used in the preamble of the federal constitution. He said there is no the people, there are different peoples of the state. So, but even there, I mean, thanks to the constitution, also because of the war, but I mean, then they managed them to get the popular identity. So I think it is necessary to perhaps have the faculty and the concept of demos with the nation. There are many interesting details about how the social welfare is designed in multinational federalism. There is a huge detail about the so-called trade-off between indeed solidarity and importance for diversity, but even in countries like Switzerland, they have forms of common social justice. So they have forms of solidarity. So to say that, I think that it is here, perhaps were written also in another historical period, but I don't think that they deliver. I mean, today, I think that today, I mean, there are many federal experiences that actually show the possibility of having multinational federal entities. So this was a comment that I'm happy to share. So,
thank you very much, Professor. So we are just online closing remarks. So please.
Well, I was not planning, but if you give me the chance, just a comment. I have a feeling that when you explain what are the challenges ahead, what are the shortcomings, we are looking to both a world and a Europe that have very little to do with what was not that far in the past. I mean, we were saying when Europe was great was when we had nation states that were like the beacons of the world. Now the world is global. We have many more, let's say, leading powers. So that is not something that you could, let's say, transfer or project nowadays. Europe again, a Europe of 9, of 12 has nothing to do with a Europe of 27. This is linked with the type of enlargement, deepening enlargement, institutional reform. I think this is it has been always the key to try to make Europe capable of confronting the challenges of gravity. And for this to happen, you need to be able to adopt the decisions that are needed. Now I think we are in a situation of a stalemate where unless there is a common thread in the form of a crisis, then we all get together on a very concrete moment and then we push the thing forward. Unless that happens, we are now in a situation of paralysis. So we need to change things, but then for that we have unanimity. And unanimity breaks it all. It's just my general comment. How can we break this situation? You need political will. We have done it with political will in Europe. First, it's been complete EMU. At least we have the monetary union. Why? There was political will, and the leaders at the time decided to go for it. If you conclude that this is fostering an violent and autocratic way of organizing society, I do not agree. I must say, as long as those components have legitimacy, because those are democratic entities. And if it is the leaders at the end of the day, they are democratically elected, that is how it started. They were democratic. Those comments.
Thank you very much.
Just say one sentence. I think I'm the only non-European in the room. I just put a question. Is it any better at national level? All the discussion that we have here, that the immobility not going forward, etc. We outside Europe look at Europe with, let's say, an envy eye. Is it any better? Look at what happened in the US the other day with its famous debt limit. Is our national governments that functional, that more functional than what you have in Europe? Just a question. Rhetorical.
I think
They try to put a new constitution and it failed horribly.
Thank you very much for the very interesting debate and for the presentation. I adjourn the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thank you very much, all of you for coming, especially to the speakers, those of you who've come from afar, to this distinguished panel, to the audience. I enjoyed the discussion a lot, and will certainly take the cue from what Mr. President has suggested. We will continue with this project. It is basically placed right at the heart of the new university and its European orientation. So we'll be in touch soon after the summer. Enjoy.